Hi, my friends, and welcome into today's episode of Forte Catholic. I'm so glad that you are here. Happy Holy Week from me and the whole team here at Forte Catholic. We hope that you are enjoying it and are ready to celebrate Triduum and Easter to celebrate the old risen Jesus. We're all very excited around here. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Kathryn Whitaker. We talk a little bit about Holy Week, specifically in connection with her recent trip to the Holy Land. The places that we hear about all throughout Holy Week and all of the readings is where Kathryn spent almost 2 weeks going to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth and all these beautiful places. She's going to share how the trip has changed her spiritual life, how it's changed how she reads the scriptures, hears especially a lot of the things that we've heard on Palm Sunday and this Holy Week, but also how it changed her mentally and physically as well. We hope that you enjoy that. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about how you don't have to go to the Holy Land in order to have an experience with God. We talk about the story of the burning bush and how God is present wherever we are. He's present in our work. He's present here in this room. He's present wherever you are listening and watching this right now. And often we don't recognize him because we're either too busy or we're just not in a place where we expect to experience God. So we hope that that you'll really enjoy this episode. Without further ado, here we go. What's up? Welcome to Forte Catholic. I am Taylor Stroll. That is Kathryn Leandro Whitaker. How are you, Kathryn?
Good. I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Good. I'm glad that you're back. You went on a very, very fancy trip. But first, my name appears first in the show. We're going to talk about my trip. Is that okay with you?
Well, since I'm the one who is invited to be here, yes, I guess I'll let you go first, Taylor.
Okay. So we've got, people that are listening to this, watching this already know that we're talking about your trip to the Holy Land. But I went on it, and you were gone for it seemed like 2 whole weeks, pretty close. I was gone. I did my quickest ever turnaround ever for any trip ever. I got on a plane at 6 a.m. right here in Aggieland, good old College Station, and I got on a plane back at noon the next day. I went to South Dakota and back in 33 hours.
And also to 2 extremely remote airports. It's not like you flew from New York to LA or
right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's very funny for me when everybody's like, "Oh yeah, our airport's so small. How did you get here?" And I'm like, our airport is literally 1 gate. Pre-COVID, it was 2 gates. There was a United gate and American gate. United left. They're like, this place is pointless. We're not staying here. So it was great. So there were 5 whole gates in South Dakota, and they were like, our airport's so small. I was like, it's 5 times as large as mine.
You're like, I actually have you beat. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was such a quick turnaround. I'm still exhausted. We're recording this on the Monday after I got back, then the Monday after you got back from your trip. And I'm exhausted just from my little 33-hour trip. So I can only imagine how you're feeling after your 2 weeks in the Holy Land. But
this is why I have this, Taylor.
Sonic? What's in
Sonic.
It? Pure alcohol?
Well, because it's a family-friendly show. Is it a family-friendly show? It's vanilla Dr. Pepper. I promise I don't have anything more in there. Not yet. It's not quite, yeah. It's not 5 o'clock here.
I would be drinking if I didn't have to go to track practice immediately following this. So, but I went up for a junior high youth rally. This is for people who are tracking. Actually, I didn't even realize this connection. This is the event that you helped me plan for 3 months ago. Remember when you and I worked out cancel culture stuff? Yes, you wrote my talk. Remember that?
Yes,
3 months ago?
I do remember that. Yes.
I don't know if you remember, and I don't even know if the listeners remember because it was 3 months ago, but I was so excited for that, and I was going up to South Dakota for the first time. I was going to give this brand new talk that you wrote for me that I was just going to give and say it was mine, and that trip got canceled because of snow. It was like a huge snowstorm. So
here, snow there, not here.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I couldn't, all my flights were getting canceled, and they ended up having to cancel the event too because it was a lot of snow for South Dakota, not just a lot of snow for this Texan, right? So this was a makeup event. So I went and did junior high youth rally. I ended up giving a version of that talk.
I was going to say, how did my talk go?
It went pretty well. I dumbed it down. And like
Oh, okay.
at first, it was like we already had dumbed it down because it was your talk, and I was going to give it to high school students, and me giving your
Right.
talk is already dumbed down. But I dumbed it
It's
down even
weird.
more for the junior high kids, right? But I had a blast. Usually, junior high kids annoy me. Like I refuse to coach them because like walk with them. Like I'll go in and do events. I'll be like the private guy, like hire me, come in, I'll do the thing. But then like I'm not like gonna I'm walking with high schoolers. Like I just know this about myself, right? But they threw what I think might be the coolest junior high lock-in that I've ever been to. There was like lights and the setup for it. They had what are those called? The have you seen those things where you put on like the big bubble soccer? Is that what it's called? Have you seen that?
It's
where you
like
put like a
hamster
big
ball.
bubble around yourself?
It's
Yes,
like
yes,
a
yes,
hamster
yes.
ball. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I got to go in and I gave a talk and I led worship, but I also just got to hang out with them. I was there till 3 a.m. because it was a lock-in that ended at 7. And at 3 a.m.
You were trying to stay awake
out.
for all. Were you trying to stay awake for all 30 hours of this trip, Taylor? Is that what you were trying to do?
Not quite, because I was able to sleep in the next day. I got a solid 7 hours of sleep after going to bed at 3 a.m. because like going to bed at 3 a.m. isn't all that weird for me. So like I was actually able to do it pretty well. Now, granted, whenever I wake up or whenever I stay up till 3 a.m, I haven't woken up at 4:45 that morning, which is what I had to do
Fair.
that day to get on the plane. So I was pretty tired by the end of it, but we had such a good time. They put on such a good show. They had that. They had like all sorts of games and fun, and there was like 70 kids there, and they just had an absolute blast. And your talk went well. And then I got to fly back the next day with my first class upgrade. I didn't have Dr. Pepper on the flight back because it was all free and comped. It was very nice.
Wow, first class upgrade feels kind of bougie there, Taylor.
I know it's the only place in my life that I don't feel poor, but just because I have just racked up enough miles and status with American that every now and then I get to feel fancy going from a 1-gate airport to a 5-gate airport.
To a 5-gate.
Okay, enough about me. We're primarily here today to talk about your trip to the Holy Land. And I think it's perfect because we're here in Holy Week, which every year on the show we call Holy WEAK because we're just all kind of limping into it. But you went to the Holy Land right before Holy Week. So was it a 30-hour turnaround? Did you get upgraded to first class? Did you drink a lot of Dr. Pepper? These are the things that I want to know about your trip to.
Well, as you were talking about American, I kind of feel like American is dead to me. That was the airline that we flew out, but we actually didn't because they messed up our flights. So I got to fly 3 different airlines to get there and back. But yeah, we were there just a couple weeks. I mean, we just have been home a week and a half. Is that right? Yeah, we've been home a week and a half. So it was 12 days in the Holy Land. So we started in Tel Aviv and then went up to Galilee.
Yes, everyone's favorite city in the middle.
Hey, but can I say this? First of all, the media has done a terrible job of showcasing the Holy Land because I was prepared to be like on alert and nervous, and I was really concerned about flying into the Tel Aviv airport, and like they had talked us through like these are the things that you need to know about security. So I don't want to say freaked out, but I was definitely more concerned. And we get there and I'm like, is this Miami? Because it was basically like Miami, but with Israelis. And they were so kind and so nice, and nothing was at all what I thought it would be. It was beautiful and stunning. And my daughter and I, she's 17, she went with me. We walked around Tel Aviv the whole day by ourselves and never once was I nervous. It was quite lovely. So started there, went up to Galilee to the northern part of Israel, then kind of came back toward Bethlehem over into Palestine, and then ended in Jerusalem. So we took day trips to places like Nazareth and other things like that in the Dead Sea. But for the most part, those are the places that we stayed: Galilee, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem. So, I mean, I don't even know where to start, Taylor. It was life altering. And I don't use that word lightly. I've been amazing places. We've been to Italy, we've been to Europe before, but I don't even know how to explain what it's like to be in the same places really that we're walking through in Holy Week, like Palm Sunday. I looked at my daughter and she went to the earlier mass and she goes, "Go with God, Mom." So I was like, it was that intense. And she said, "Yeah, buena suerte. Hope you do okay." And it was intense. So I suspect that it will never, nothing will ever be the same in all the best of ways, but nothing will ever be the same. Scripture, the way I pray, all of it.
we'll get into that serious stuff, but I think I saw something. I could be wrong. I think I saw another way that you got permanently altered. Is that correct?
I did. This is when watching YouTube comes in handy. So there's one
Oh,
tattoo.
just
Sorry.
flexing on the camera, huh?
Yeah, there's one. And then this one's upside down, but that's the second one. So the one on my arm is for me. The one on my wrist, I guess, is for me. The one on my arm, my daughter and I actually got matching tattoos.
Oh my goodness, you are not a tattoo person in my brain, and now you said the trip is life altering for you. It's life altering for me because now I have to like shift my view of you as a tattoo person.
I'm one of the. I said on Instagram, I was like, I guess I'm that Catholic person now who loves Jesus, cusses a little, and has tattoos. So here we are.
Now you need to play guitar, become a worship leader, and wear like a 3/4 t-shirt so that whenever you say, "All right, everybody, lift your hands," the shirt comes down a little, and then you can see your tattoo. You're like, "Oh, she has a past." That's what you need to become now. That's who you are in my mind.
Well, you're gonna have to give up the dream of the guitar and the singing because that's never gonna happen.
You sound and play just like every other Catholic musician.
Well, just maybe pop in like some, like I can lip sync like Milli Vanilli, and then I can show off my tattoos. Yeah, I never.
I love how I'm upgrading you to cool in my brain, and then you drop a very hip
Milli
Milli Vanilli reference. I only know what that is because Allison Sullivan has also dropped that name on this show probably 4 years ago. And I'm like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. And I only know it because Allison explained it to me, and I couldn't tell you a thing about it.
I'm so glad I have Allison to back me up. Plus, she's got the half sleeve. I mean, she's like really rocking the tattoo. No, I mean, I thought about it for a really long time, years, in fact. And my husband and I talked about it. My daughter and I prayed about it. Like it felt right to do it. And I know some people have really strong opinions, pro and con. Um, but for me, it was really meaningful and I don't regret it. And I'm so glad that it's permanent. And I smile every time I look at my tattoos now. I never thought I would. These are things that Kathryn never thought she would say, particularly on like in a public forum, but I certainly never thought that I would ever say them. I think I have some family members that may not be talking to me. We'll find out soon. But I love it. I don't regret it at
I
all.
didn't need tattoos to make that a reality. I did that all on my own.
Nice.
Okay, so explain the tattoo. So you have one on. I can't even really see it because you're so far away from me. I'll see it when we're editing. But for the people, especially for the people listening, what you have one on your wrist and one on like your bicep for whenever you flex.
Yes.
So explain the wrist one. That you said that's not the one that's matching your daughter. That's just for you. Explain
Correct.
the one on your wrist.
So it's the Jerusalem cross, which is the big cross with the 4 on each corner. So symbolizing Jerusalem is the center of our faith and that it spreads to all 4 corners of the world and also the 4 main gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then it's surrounded by ivy, and then it's got 3 crowns on the top. And then the one on my bicep is the Holy Spirit. So it's the dove in kind of 3 different forms that Anna Laura and I got. So why we chose
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
That's right. Why we chose those, we're choosing to keep that private. But I love that we shared, and we actually got that tattoo on our arms. We actually got that one at the same time. So the place where we got them, I think this is significant. I think it's a bigger part of the story. So Razuk Tattoo has been tattooing pilgrims for 700 years in Jerusalem. So since 1300, and it's in its
that guy
28th.
Must be very old.
They're in their 28th generation of family members. Like,
wow,
it's impressive. So the dad who's the 27th generation, is who gave me my tattoo, and it was his son, who's the 28th generation, who gave Anna Laura hers. So that sort of seemed appropriate and pretty lovely. Yeah. I love the significance of that. Yeah.
So going back to the one on your wrist, the cross. Why does it have 3 crowns on the top whenever Jesus just wore one?
Well, so they actually have stamps. So that's what makes them unique, is that they have a stamp, and these stamps are ancient, 700 years. And so they stamp you with the tattoo and then they tattoo it on you. And so that's the way the meaning of that stamp meant a lot to me personally, and so that's the one that I chose to do. So you can remove any part, like you can put 2 or 3 different stamps together. You can make them bigger or smaller or whatever you want to do. So yeah, I chose it to put it there, and I like the size, and I love all the things on it.
So the stamp is the cross is the stamp. I don't get why there's three crosses. That's their stamp.
That was their, like, the way that the stamp comes is that way. Like, I think below it had the words Jerusalem, and then I said, don't tattoo that part. I don't want that part on there. Um, so they have hundreds of stamps that you can take and like put them together, or take one thing off and put something else. So you can sort of create your own permanent inking, however you want it to look. So I like the way that one looked. So that's what I chose.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that we spent half the time talking about your tattoos, let's talk about, actual faith in the Holy Land. So,
Holy Land stuff.
You said you went to Bethlehem and Nazareth. Let's start you said, I don't know where to start. So let's start in the beginning of Jesus's life. So Bethlehem and Nazareth, you went there. What were your biggest takeaways from, Bethlehem and Nazareth, from the Christmas story as we head into Holy Week?
And I think I knew this going into the Holy Land experience, but I don't think that it really sunk in until we got there. So the way that it works, if you go with a group that's Catholic, is that wherever you celebrate Mass, so for example, when we celebrated Mass in Bethlehem at the Church of the Nativity, you actually celebrate the readings are from that particular Mass, meaning, so we did the Christmas readings in Bethlehem, which is really meaningful because, like, when we were in Bethany, we did the readings about Lazarus, where he was raised
Cool.
from the dead. So you're not necessarily doing the daily readings, unless, of course, it's a Sunday. But so that makes it even more, you're already like hyper aware of where you are. And then you read the readings of the place where the thing happened. And that's when your mind kind of gets blown. So I think I was surprised at how deeply that would resonate with me. I think I kind of knew that. There's a special, like, Magnificat Holy Land, like, accompanying guide that you can take with you that have all the readings in there that you can sort of follow along. But I don't think I realized how much that was going to hit, in the deepest part of my heart. Also, the world is small. So we roll into the church in Bethlehem, and I look up and I'm like, is that Father Jared? And he's a priest in our diocese here in Austin. He was there with some guys from his ministry program at Our Lady of Wisdom. And I sort of knew that he was in the Holy Land, but we live 45 minutes away from each other, and to fly all the way over to Israel and turn around and see, like, someone that kind of blows your mind a little bit, that you're in some ways sort of following the same. And the church all of a sudden feels very small. Big church, feels really small. So those were a
You
few
had that
things.
in the Catholic context. The only time that's ever happened to me is on ski lifts. I'm on a ski lift and I look down, I see somebody from my hometown. I'm like, "Hi, how you doing down there?" Just wave, and that's it. So no spiritual meaning, just hey,
No
look,
spiritual.
there's somebody from my neighborhood in Colorado.
It kind of blew my mind a little bit. And then just having the group of pilgrims that we went with, there were 33 of us, which I thought was a significant number. Um, but we were from all different places and stations in the world, from 17 all the way to 70. And so sometimes you think, like, I don't know how this is all going to work, how everyone's going to get along. But there was a real receptivity of everyone that was there. Like, people that were being patient with others that needed a little bit more time. No one was annoyed that we had, like, these teenagers with us. We had a 17 and a 19-year-old with us. And it was just this real beautiful, like, we are all here to dive deeper into our faith, but we're also here to have a lot of fun, which we 100% did. And it was just fantastic all around. So those were some of the things that, I mean, you hope for, you wonder if they're going to happen, but to, like, actually experience them and to see them transform in front of your eyes was pretty remarkable. And then, quite frankly, Taylor, to share it with my daughter, who's 17 and we're launching out into the world. She leaves for college in the fall, was maybe, if I had to chalk up, like, best life decisions I've ever made, I'd have to put that definitely in the top 5. I mean, it was such a good, beautiful experience for the two of us. So I loved it.
I love that. How many kids do you have?
Shut up. I have 6. That is a given. Okay, I'm talking about other things. I knew you were going to bring that up. As soon as that came out of my mouth, I should have said 10.
Going on vacation with the 17-year-old. One of those is getting knocked out. That's
and then
awesome.
Don't forget my husband. Yeah, but it's fine. Yeah. They know what I mean. Yeah, it was just, man, like, there were a lot of really special moments that she and I shared on that trip, and I won't ever forget them.
That's great. I'm just now realizing that, like, one of your first shows as co-host on the show was talking about your trip to Rome. You go too many places. I was like, why does some
No,
of this sound familiar? And I'm like, wait, we did this when you did your family trip to Rome like 3 months ago. Talk about bougie.
I I was actually just getting ready to say, I hope that your listeners will think, well, Kathryn's leaving on another. I'll tell you where I'm going next week. College Station. Like that's as
Nice.
exciting as my life
Nice.
gets. That's the other Holy Land. But we don't normally travel like this. Like we take road
Mm-hmm.
trips, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not normally getting on an airplane and flying
Mm-hmm.
internationally. So my life, I'm sorry, Taylor, for the next 18 months at least, you're going to be like, you're boring. I need a new co-host.
No, no. Now that you have tattoos, you're going to become a
Oh,
multinational,
whew,
multi-platinum recording artist and travel the globe.
I've secured my spot. Praise the Lord.
We need to get a picture of you flexing your bicep tattoo and Father Rob Galea flexing his bicep tattoo, and they'll look exactly the same. We'll be like, guess whose arm is
Ex-
which?
Except I'm going to need to pump some serious
Yeah.
iron for my biceps to be as big as his.
Yeah, he's
Him or yeah,
ridiculous.
there's a few priests that I can think of that I'm like, I'm gonna need. Actually, when my 19-year-old comes home this summer, he has a whole workout plan because I was like, John Paul, I want some arms this summer, and he's like, all right, I got you, mom. So he's got weights up in his room, so I'm gonna be up there lifting with my 19-year-old this summer. So I mean, save the spot for me and Father Rob later this
Yeah.
fall. Maybe I'll show you my biceps.
Okay, so let's talk about Holy Week stuff. So where'd you go that connected with Holy Week specifically?
Pretty much everywhere. I mean, we did the Palm Sunday. You name it, we did it. Palm Sunday walk, we did, and then of course,
Did people lay down
Thursday.
palms for you to walk upon so your feet didn't
No
touch the
one, we were
ground?
not that bougie.
Were you
We
riding on
weren't
an
that bougie.
ass?
Nope. But I'm gonna leave that one alone. Um, and then Thursday, I mean, obviously went to the upper room where the disciples were with Jesus, the Garden of Gethsemane, the house of Caiaphas where he was imprisoned.
Wait, the upper room, like, so that's not one that I've heard that you can like actually go to. Like, it's the original upper room. Like, you actually got to go there.
So, in some of the places that you go in the Holy Land, you'll hear things like, "We think this is the place," or this would be close to what we think." So that would be one of them that they're like, "We think this is the area." Like there are like the Garden of Gethsemane, some of the trees that you see there look like they could be really old. I don't know if they're 2,000 years old, but it certainly gives you the idea of like what that garden looks like. So visually you can see that. And there's a spot actually it's actually up at Dominus Flevit. So when they talk about Jesus seeing Jerusalem and weeping, that's where he's standing. So you can see basically everything in the Holy Land when it comes to Holy Week of what that last week of his life looks like. There's the Via Dolorosa where you actually walk the actual stations of the cross, and so when you're up there on the Mount of Olives at Dominus Flevit, you can actually see spatially like he was here, and then he walked here, and then he did this. So it all comes together that you can see all the places where he was. And for me, that was sort of the end of the trip. So we were able to sort of see how it all played out visually right in front of us. So now when I read the scriptures, I mean, I guess there were some things that I thought maybe seemed bigger or maybe they're smaller. Like the Garden of Gethsemane, I would say is the only place that looked like I thought it would. And not because I'd watched like Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, but it's the only place that in my mind looked similar. Everything else, I was like the Sea of Galilee, for example, really should be called the Lake of Galilee because you can stand on the shore and you can see the whole thing. So I'm thinking in my mind when Jesus walks on water that he's like in the ocean, but that's not the case. He did walk on water. There was a storm, but it looks very different when you're actually standing on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. So that kind of stuff I think I don't know, I don't think the right word is surprised. I think it crystallized what I had had in my mind. So now when I read scripture, I'm like, oh, okay, so we were standing here and this is about the place. So Perum is a place that we went. And then, of course, Friday, um, the Stations of the Cross, we obviously, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is probably the holiest place for Christians and certainly Catholics in the Holy Land. So I wasn't prepared to see Calvary, so where Jesus is crucified, where they prepare his body for burial, and the tomb, it's all in the same church. You're like 20 feet away. And in my mind, when you read scripture, you're like mountaintop, tomb, like these are like super far away, but they are not super far away at all. So that that church is a pretty powerful place in the Holy Land. I mean, I think if you asked anybody, Taylor, like what's the most impactful part? I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Catholic that wouldn't put the Holy Sepulchre at the top of the list. I mean, it's the source and summit of our faith right there. So that was
But
pretty exceptional.
yet we started with 9 minutes on tattoos.
You started with tattoos. I was ready.
No, I started with South Dakota.
Fair. It's fair.
Okay, so you had mentioned that like I've heard of a few people that come back from the Holy Land. They're like, it says it completely changes how they interact with Scripture, how they read Scripture, how they interact with readings. Which, like, yes, we're literally in Holy Week where these readings are coming up. So you said you have already experienced Palm Sunday since the trip. You have not yet experienced Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and either Saturday or Sunday. Whichever day you want Jesus to rise, you get to pick by which mass you go to. But what are you looking forward to in this Holy Week? Like that you experienced from the trip, like something where you're like, I'm really looking forward to this, or this. This is one of the things that I've really been thinking about heading into this week.
Well, I actually think it was something that my pastor, Father Tom, said. So he was in the Holy Land last March, so about a year ago. And he said if there was ever a year for you to do the Triduum, this would be the year. So I plan on doing Holy Thursday, Good Friday, going to the vigil, and then getting up with the chickens and going to 7:30 a.m. Mass at our parish. I think walking in,
That's a
quite frankly,
quadrium if you're going twice.
yes. Well, I really, yeah, we'll come back to that in a second. But I think that walking into that with no expectations, like I think of all the things that I took from the Holy Land as as deeply as scripture and prayer and all of that has changed. I think my interactions with people have changed. And I think that maybe that was what I needed to take from the Holy Land is how I interact with other people and maybe the charity that I give them. And so I think as I enter into the Triduum, I think I'm really looking forward to just being, just knowing that I have been there and then to come all the way back and no matter where you are in the world, you celebrate the same mass, you hear the same readings. And to me that feels really full circle to know that whether I am in Jerusalem or whether I am in Austin, that what I hear on the Triduum will be the same. I think it was a year ago. I did actually, speaking of Father Rob, I did an interview with him and I was asking him, I said, of the Triduum, like, what's your favorite of all pieces of that particular mass? What's your favorite part? And he said, Good Friday. He said, it's when I walk in to the tabernacle and see that it's empty. And he said, like this ache that I have. And he said, and I just rest my head on the tabernacle. And that whole interview of him talking about this longing that we have to be unified with Christ, and he said it much more eloquently than I am. But I think maybe it will be Friday. I mean, Friday's always been the service that meant the most to me. Growing up Protestant, we did the Holy Thursday, Maundy Thursday kind of thing, and then skipped over, and then basically it was Easter. So for me, Good Friday has always symbolized like the uniquely Catholic part, and maybe that's the part that I'm looking forward to the most. Um, the absence of Christ and the longing for him for Easter Sunday. Sorry, that got deep fast.
It's a weird answer. What are you looking forward to this Holy Week? The absence of Christ.
I know. I thought about it as I said that, but it's true. It's true. Yeah.
I got too much Christ in the Holy Land. I'm looking forward to a break on Friday.
I think it's like the complete and total surrender. We don't like to give up control in our lives. And so to surrender that to a Lord that loves us deeply feels very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's
And
not usually a place that I feel comfortable, but I mean, why the heck not? It's Holy Week.
And you said you didn't say it as eloquently as Father Rob. I think you said it just as eloquently. It just sounds better when he says it because he has an accent. It has nothing. You have a very deep Texas,
I do too, but not as good
accent,
as his.
But it's not as cool as his. He's got that like
That's fair.
Middle European, or I guess it's
Maltese.
Eastern European / Australia. There's nobody with an accent quite like him. There's a few people with an accent like you. They just don't usually allow them to talk on camera.
They've banned them from podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, what's really funny to close out this beautiful conversation about Holy Week, we're going to end by talking about your accent. I don't know if I've told you this on air before. Maybe we have, and maybe I talked about it. The last time we talked about it was the last time we talked about a trip that you went on 3 months ago when you went to Rome. But the little clips that I make of every episode, there's like AI that like listens to it and gives captions, and it gets mine correct like 85% of the time. It doesn't know you're a human being. It doesn't even know that you're speaking English. It's like, what is she even doing? It's like, hey, this is Taylor saying, hello, welcome to Forte Catholic. How are you? And then it's just like, beep, burp, burp, bop, burp, bop. That
like
was
R2D2.
Yeah, exactly. It's all ones and zeros.
Oh my gosh. Well, someone asked me, they're like, hey, don't you know that Instagram, like you can fix the captions? And I'm like, lady, if I spent all that time fixing captions on Instagram, I'd never have time to get on Instagram. Like it's just, so I figure it's like a fun little pay attention game. Like,
it is fun because it makes you say things you definitely didn't say. And we've talked about some of those because you definitely wouldn't have said what you said some of those times.
Sometimes I do have to like go back and read them and be like, or sometimes when I say ice, ICE, it thinks that I'm cussing and it like, beep, like bleeps it out. I'm like, no, I was just saying ice, but
yeah,
whatever, Instagram.
That's awesome. Well, good. I'm glad that you enjoyed your trip. I'm glad that you didn't come back with a Holy Land accent. You still got that good old Southern Texas accent. I'm looking forward to Holy Week too, but I'm looking forward to the opposite way. I've had enough absence of Christ this Lent. I'm looking forward to having a non-absence of Christ. So we're going into
That's fair.
You're going in with very different expectations than I am into our Holy WEAK. So I'm glad you enjoyed your trip, and honestly, it's going to take me a few days to get used to Kathryn being a person that has a tattoo. I think I thought I was a little bit cooler than you, and now that's over. It's just over. Like there's just I have no chance anymore. Because I can't even get a tattoo because I'm too fat and hairy. I look stupid.
You know what? I'm going to tell you what Allison told you. Don't say that about yourself, Taylor. I love you just the way that you are.
I don't.
But you wouldn't talk to your kids that way, or you wouldn't talk to your wife that way. So
I am honest with people. I had a conversation with one of my athletes the other day. I was like, look, you need to start working a little bit harder. You're getting a little pudgy. So I am honest with people.
I think that you are honest with people, but I think that you're more harsh on yourself than you are on other people.
Yeah, because I'm the worst person I know.
Taylor.
It all scales very well.
I need Allison to back me up here. Yeah, that's what you should do sometime. You should have we should gang up on you. You should put the two of us together and do an interview with you.
That sounds terrible.
You're already shaking your head. You're like, absolutely not.
She actually just asked me like, hey, I've got this friend in town. Do you want to do an episode together? I'm like, no, I just want to talk to people one-on-one. It's just so much easier. So much easier.
We love you, Taylor.
Well, thank you. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you're finding yourself here this Holy Week off of work with some extra time, might I suggest that you check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Forte Catholic. Not only do we have entire full-length episodes of this show where you can watch, not just hear us, but we also have some great other series like our Catholic Foundation series, which is our Catholicism 101, Introduction to Catholicism. So we have an introduction to what is the church, what's the mission of the church, the sacraments, the moral life, Mary. We answer a lot of like basic questions, and it's myself and one of my really good friends. So I hope that you'll enjoy those videos, whether you're new to Catholicism or you just want a little bit of a refresher. She has a master's degree and I have half of one, so hopefully you can learn something over there. We also have a Catholic Perspective series where we look at some of our favorite movies, TV shows, books, and talk about those. So we've got a lot of your favorite entertainment and media over there that we share about from a Catholic worldview through a Catholic lens. We've also got talks and music and all sorts of stuff over at youtube.com/Forte Catholic. Go hit subscribe and check out all the great things that we have going on over there. Welcome back to Forte Catholic. I am Taylor Schroll, and that is Kathryn Holier Than Thou Whitaker.
Wow, I quit, Taylor.
Oh man. So actually nice little transition that I didn't even really intend. I knew that like the bulk of what we're going to talk about today was your trip to the Holy Land. And something that I've been focusing on the last couple of weeks is actually something. It was a video that came out when I was in college by a guy who has now been like canceled by the Christian world. Did you ever know who Rob Bell was? Did you ever hear of Rob Bell?
Oh, that
He
name
was
sounds familiar.
he like when I was in college, he was like top 5 Protestant pastor, making videos and speakers. It's like, like I knew like 10 prominent, Protestant pastors, like televangelists, speakers, whatever. And
Right.
he was one of the like top 5 that I knew. And I just thought about your top 5 list from last segment and it made me laugh. I didn't even mean to do that. But he had this video series and it was called, this particular one was called Breathe. And I don't agree with, I didn't agree with everything he said back then. I don't agree with almost anything he says now, but this like 4-minute video called Breathe, I think it was pneuma, which, a lot of people know now is, the Greek word for breath. We know that because of him. Like he's the one that made it popular, like in, the scripture scholars like, oh, we've known it for years. I'm like, yeah, you're a nerd. You don't have
because
tattoos.
you've been studying it your whole life. That's right.
But he talks about the ruah, the breath in the Old Testament, and the pneuma, the breath in the New Testament. And the story that he used was the story of Moses and the burning bush, which is a story that we've all heard a bunch of times. Like it's one of those stories that like makes the childhood cut. Like we all heard that whenever we were little kids. It's like, hey, there's a burning bush. There's all this little. It's like we pick 8 stories that are palpable for the kids from the Old Testament. And that's one of them. And he's talking about that story, which is, yes, a story we've all heard a ton of times, but it was a realization that has stuck with me since then. It's been over a decade since I've been in college, and this has stuck with me ever since then, that Moses, he was born, put into a wicker basket, pushed down the stream, raised by the Egyptians, became second command, blah, blah, blah. But then he kills an Egyptian, right? That's the book of Exodus in like 4 seconds. So
I was going to say, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, Taylor.
Thank you. I give talks on salvation history pretty often, and you have to put like 4,000 years in 30 minutes. So I've got it down pretty tight,
The Cliff Notes.
Yeah, exactly. So he kills a guy and he has to flee. He's gone for 30 years. That's a long time from when he kills the guy before he comes back and says, let my people go. Like he's an old man when he comes back. And he becomes like a farmer. He gets married. He meets his family, blah, blah, blah. He becomes this farmer. He's like a shepherd a shepherd farmer, right? And he's walking around, and how animals graze back before there were fences. They just go wherever they want, and the shepherd goes with them, and they make like these loops. And what Rob Bell pointed out was like, this is a loop that Moses would have done multiple times over the course of 30 years. So he's walking around. Let's just for argument's sake, let's just say it's like a 5-mile radius, right? So how often are you going to walk in a 5-mile radius around your house? Pretty often over the course of 30 years, right? Like multiple times a week, multiple times a month, like depending on how you're farming and how you're walking, right? It's a lot is the point. And whenever God starts talking to Moses through the burning bush, he says, Moses, take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. And that's like the part that, yeah, we've all heard that story. Yeah, it's all very nice. We've all made weed references about the burning bush. It's all fun and games. We're all used to this part, right? But the part I wasn't used to was that Moses had been walking on that holy ground for 30 years and didn't recognize it. Right? It's not like the ground just became holy 30 years. It's not like God's presence was not there for 30 years. It's just like Moses there's multiple options. He wasn't ready to see it, or God wasn't ready to reveal himself, or things hadn't gotten bad enough in Egypt or whatever that God was, whatever, right? But from like a human perspective, it's like it was holy ground that whole time, and he just didn't recognize it until God made a bush burn and started talking out of it for Moses to realize that he was standing on holy ground. So it hit me during this last part of Lent where I'm like, where are those places where I'm walking constantly and God is there and it's holy ground and I'm just not treating it as such or not recognizing it as such?
I'm sitting here like, please don't make me answer this question.
Okay, so the question that I have for myself, the question that there's really two questions. One, they're both serious questions, but the second one gets even more serious, right? But where is a place in your life where you have encountered God where you didn't expect him? Right. So I think a lot of people come on to podcasts or give talks. They're like, oh, I went to adoration. I had a great experience. Or, those people who are talking all the time who are like, oh, I went to Rome and Israel and I had an experience with God, but there's other people who it's like, I was driving in my car, listening to the radio and I had an experience with God. Or I was washing dishes and I had an experience with God. Or I, made a grilled cheese sandwich and it came out with Jesus' face on it or whatever. Right. So like, where has there been a place in your life where you found God in a place that you didn't really expect?
Actually, so we have this tradition that whenever one of us goes out of town, we always go out on a date, my husband and I, and like say like this is what happened, and we like recap it and like relive it, and it's really great. And so when I went on the pilgrimage to Israel, Scott was like, "All right, so when you come back, we're going to go to dinner. I want to hear all the things." And we went to this great little place up in Georgetown, which is north of Austin, and we're eating, and we kind of noticed like our server. I mean, she's around, but she's not really around, and we're kind of like, "Oh, the service is okay." And then she comes up to the table and says something, and at that point, we were talking about our kids, and she was like, "Oh, you're on a date. You're not supposed to talk about your kids." And I was like, "Oh, we were just mentioning this one thing." I said, "Really, we're here because I just got back from Israel." And she said, and then all of a sudden, Taylor, like this person who was not interested in giving us our food, not really interested in being around, all of a sudden she like sets the little book down that has like the receipts and everything. She sets it down on the table and she's like, "What was it like?" And for the next 10 minutes, we talk about our faith and God and Israel. And she was fascinated. She's like, "I've never heard of Christians going to Israel before because I think in some people's mind, you only go there if you're Jewish or you only go there if you're Muslim." And so ensued the next 10 minutes us talking about our faith. And I'm like, I was literally here just to share all this with my husband, never expecting that the gal that was bringing us our martinis and old fashions was going to be the one that we were going to have. And it was one of those lot, but she walked away and my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, wow, God really is everywhere. It was awesome. And we were just in our own little, like, we were in our own little space, not realizing that maybe we had an opportunity to invite someone else into that conversation. And it was beautiful.
Yeah. I actually have one that I wasn't even planning on sharing, but you started talking about a restaurant. I had one that I haven't thought about in forever when I was on the other side of the table. I was the server. I was a server at Applebee's in good old Steubenville, Ohio, right? And when, it's relatively busy, I would have like 4 to 6 tables, depending, 6 tables during the day. And like, we would split on Friday, Saturday night. We all had 4 because we were busy, right? But during like the lunchtime, it'd be busy from like, 11 to 1 or whatever. But then this little old lady came in all by herself at like on a slow day. So I had like one other table out of like the 5 or 6 that I had in my section that day. And this little old lady comes in and I forget how it came up. I don't know if I was like, is anybody else joining you or whatever, right? But she just started, I took her order. So I'm just like going through my normal thing. I'm at work. I'm just like, "Hi, I'm Taylor. Welcome to Applebee's. I'm going to be your server. What can I get for you?" Right. Bring her a drink or whatever. It was over a decade ago. So I don't remember how it started, but I remember doing the thing that they tell all servers not to do. And she's sitting in her booth at Applebee's at like 1:15 in the afternoon. And however it came up, her husband had just passed away like a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And they used to always come to this Applebee's once a week. And that's where they had their, like once a week date. And she was there alone, either first time, second time. Like it was still pretty recent. And I only had one other table. So I would just go in and check on them, make sure that they were okay. But I sat with her and I didn't eat lunch with her, but she had her food. I waited on her. But like, I was like, "Do you want, like," I just started talking to her. She's like, "You want me to sit down?" She's like, "Sure." So like we sat there and talked, and it was like this encounter with like one that I could be of service in a faith way when I was just trying to be of service to make a tip, right? When I was just trying to make money, right? But also like it was just this like, oh wow, like if I was just busy and work, if it would have happened at a busy time, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have had that moment. I wouldn't have had that experience. It would have just been like, what do you want to drink? What do you want to eat? I'll say I'll be really nice so that you'll give me a nice tip, right? I haven't thought about that moment in quite some time. You started talking about the one at with yours, and I was like, hey, I have one as a server. That's nice.
But some of our most profoundly impactful conversations have been with our servers. We started doing this, and I'd like to say that it was because it was us, but it was another friend. We saw him do it. When they bring out the food, he always would look at the server and say, hey, we're getting ready to bless our food. Is there anything that we can pray for you for? And inviting them in. And it always takes them off guard, because I don't think that's a question that they get often. But it's sort of like it cracks the door open. Like, we're not going to be those pushy, weird Christian people, but just know that this is a safe place for you to be prayed for and for you to be appreciated. And it has opened the door for Jesus to like bring himself into that conversation so many times in a very, non-threatening way. And they're people, right? And so it's like this really vulnerable, like, I don't know it, but it's also, you're not putting them on the spot because, hey, they have other people that they have to serve. But just for a moment, you kind of get to see Jesus there, and it's pretty great. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. And we didn't even ask her that question. It just sort of came up. I love, Taylor, though, that you took the time, that you felt called enough to be like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down, and she probably has never forgotten that.
Oh, she's probably dead.
No, no, she's not. I
I
bet
mean,
even if she is,
she was
even if she is,
she was like 80 at the time, and it's been 12 years. I think she's gone.
maybe not. But if not, she's definitely telling people in heaven about you. I love that.
Well, yeah, please let him in. He was nice to me once. Oh man. So it's interesting because I was thinking about even how I worded the question. I'm like, oh yeah, typically we have it at church or in adoration or at mass or in the Holy Land or whatever. And I was thinking about last Holy Week, and I shared about this a year ago on the show. So if you remember everything that I said from a year ago, congratulations, that's awesome. But for the rest, the other 99% of you that don't remember this, last Holy Week, last Holy Thursday, I cried in church, and that's not something I don't think I've ever done in church. And it was long story short, people who have been listening to the show for a while know that things at our parish were rough for a lot of years for a lot of different reasons. So for a lot of years, I found it hard to go to church. And even when I went, it was like, I know I'm supposed to be here, but I couldn't even try to whatever, I was not expecting to have a whole experience at church, which is wild, right? Because that's like the stereotypical place where you go to have an experience.
It's like God, a given, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it did kind of come out of this, out of nowhere, like a burning bush. We started singing the Gloria on Holy Thursday, which is the first time that you sing it for a very long time. Yeah, there's a couple of feast days or whatever, but we haven't been singing it on Sundays at the big celebrations since Ash Wednesday. And the whole church, I mean, it was the loudest it ever been. You could feel the healing, not only in myself, but in the rest of the church, in the congregation. The priests were there that were awesome. It was just this huge goosebumps moment of oh my gosh, I'm feeling God and having a connection with God, and I'm feeling God's presence in this place that I haven't forever, even though that place used to be the primary place to encounter God, right? So I think a lot of people have similar situations in their churches where it's church is hard to go to, whether it's because of family or because of the priest or because of the boring homilies or the bad music or whatever it is, right? I like that you said that you're going in with no expectations for this Holy Week, because I wasn't expecting anything, and that wasn't an intentional choice. I wasn't expecting anything because I hadn't received anything in years, and then I finally did, and it was this really special moment. So I'm going to do the Triduum stuff this week too, but I am looking, like I said earlier, for that presence of Christ. I want to feel something like that again, because things aren't as bad as they were, but they have been a little bit dry recently. So I'm going into this Holy Week looking for the whole thing of oh yeah, we don't go to church mass for us. We go there to glorify God. It's yeah, but it's nice to receive something. The whole boldly approach the throne of grace. I do want to receive something
Sure.
this Holy Week.
Yeah, I mean, also want to speak into that desolation just a little bit, because I think sometimes I don't know, maybe Taylor, somebody's listening to this and they really are like in a area or a season of their life where God feels very far away, or church is really hard to go to. Or maybe the people that they're sitting next to, or the priest that's preaching, or whatever it is, just does not feel like Jesus. Um, I think I'm going to go back to Father Rob for a minute and say, like, if that's how you feel, um, I think it was something that our priest said this weekend, but I have heard said many times before that there's nowhere that we go that God hasn't already been there first. And so when you think of Good Friday and like the absolute, I mean, he's hanging on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? I think that a lot of us can identify with that. And so I think it's okay if you go and you're like, I am getting absolutely nothing, because eventually God will show up. There will be a moment that you will be um, surprised, I think, by the enormous amount of love. And it may take months, years, decades, I don't know. But I just know that in that desolation of Friday, um, that's not the end. That's like the middle of the story and it ends. You know, we all know how the story ends, but I think when you can walk into a parish or into a religious setting and just say seriously, like whatever God wants, like hands raised, whatever God wants, knowing that He's going to give you what it is that you need in that moment and trusting in that, I think is maybe the biggest. Um, I think it's the biggest hurdle of our faith, because we want to feel Jesus, right? Like on Easter, people are like, I need to feel some Jesus today. And maybe Easter Sunday is really hard for you. Maybe you're missing somebody in the pew that should be there. Um, but it's so comforting to know that we don't just go straight from happy to happy. Like we don't just go straight from the birth of Jesus at Christmas to the resurrection at Easter, and there's no hard stuff in between. I'm always, and if I had to say, if there was anything that turned the tables for me in being Catholic, it was the fact that we identified and embraced the suffering first before we rejoiced in the resurrection, because it means something. Easter means something. It's not just this like beautiful little holiday where we hunt for Easter eggs and put on cute dresses. Like there's some
I am
suffering
going
that
to be
leads us to
wearing a
there.
cute dress this weekend,
I
though.
sure hope you are. I was getting ready to say, what color is your dress? Like, what's your color theme, Taylor?
It's like a muted yellow.
You did yellow. Did you
Yeah.
choose that, or did your
It
lovely wife
it
choose that?
there's a with my eyes. There's a little bit of yellow in my eyes, and it really makes them pop when I wear that dress. So.
Nice.
Okay, so we talked about Moses and the burning bush, and so like one of the connections to that story that you were kind of piggybacking off what you just said is that Moses, um, where was God for that whole 30 years? Because I would imagine that it felt like God had abandoned him, because God had
Wow.
saved him as a baby and built him up to be second to Pharaoh, and had this life, and then he killed somebody. And it's like, okay, I guess I screwed it up. I'm gone from God now. And he just went and hid for 30 years in the being a shepherd. And but where was God that whole 30 years? He was still there. It's just like Moses didn't recognize him for whatever reason, right? So it's like there
Right.
are, even when we feel like we're far from God, or whether we did something that we think God, we can't come to God because we did something so bad, or things were just so dry out in the desert like Moses was, right? But the second part of this story that really hit me, this is where we get to the hard question, which I texted you.
My gosh.
And
I was like, wait, that wasn't the hard question?
No,
Did
this
you
is the
text
hard
me
question.
this?
I did earlier. Where is a consistent place in your life where you are not seeing God? So like a category. So what I mean is, like, Moses wasn't seeing God while he was at work, right? He was shepherding. He was herding, right? And it's like, yeah, I think we encounter God in our relationships with our family, in our friendships, in our, like, like the podcast, or going to mass, or in our marriage, or with one of your 5 favorite children. Like, there's a lot of different places where we experience God, but I think there's some other places where we are kind of like Moses before the burning bush, where 30 years are just kind of like, we're just like walking around. Like, so it could be something that isn't, like, I have spiritual experiences watching TV, because there's a lot of times where like something really connects to me as a father, or me as a son, or me as a husband, right? But like a lot of times when I'm like playing video games, when I'm playing basketball, when I'm having conversations with certain people, where God isn't even a factor in the whole thing, right? Where it's like, I kind of need a break from God, so I'm going to go do this thing. And so I'm asking myself this question over the last couple of weeks. I don't really have a good answer. of how to fix it, but it's like, where are the places where we are walking around and not noticing God, even though He's there?
You first.
I yeah. I think a lot of times for me, video games a lot of time are my escape. So like there are certain times where I'm playing video games and it's perfectly fine. It is just a normal means of entertainment. But there's other times where I am playing video games instead of having a hard conversation, or playing video games instead of praying, or playing video games instead of a lot of times I'm overplaying when I'm stressed, because I just like, and it's not like I'm being lazy. Like a lot of times I play video games a lot after I've had the longest day of work because I'm stressed out. I'll work for 13, 14 hours a day, and then I'll play video games for the other 3 or 4, right? Where it's like, but I didn't handle anything else in my life, right? Where I didn't handle like my personal health. I didn't handle relationships well. I didn't handle my prayer life well, right? So I think for me, it's primarily video games as my solution for being stressed, instead of like going to prayer or dealing with other things that might be stressful, like, answering that phone call or calling that person back or dealing with this stressful situation or whatever. And I think a lot of times too, it's been a work in progress, but like I love sports before I loved God. So a lot of times when I'm around sports, I'm acting and saying things that I typically wouldn't say if I was in church mode or I was in whatever mode, right? So those are 2 areas for me.
Oh, this means I have to admit hard things on the podcast. I mean, I think in some ways, Taylor, so one of the things that I gave up for Lent was being on my phone before I got in the shower. So basically, when I get up, that I spend time with my kids, go work out, like that my phone is not a factor. In other words, like being present, because I think, like you, sometimes it's this thing that you start to pick up, and then before you know it, it's become this habit, but it's not really a positive habit. It's like this default, so that you're not dealing with like, am I spending some time like thanking God for, this new day that we have? Or am I listening to my kids because they're struggling with something, but I'm too focused on like checking my email or responding to text messages? So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that sometimes social media, sometimes the phone can become this like other appendage that you feel like needs equal like real estate in your heart. And instead you're like, why do I keep picking this stupid thing up when I'm just like, it's like a thing to do. Um, and yeah, I think that's one area. Maybe I'll speak for all the women out there. Sometimes when I'm dealing with an issue, like something like I need advice from people, what should start out is, hey, I'm like seeking your counsel or your advice on this, turns into, and it can be like a really fruitful like God-filled thing. And then sometimes it becomes this, I don't even think gossip is, I think that's being too nice. Like I think it turns into this like, oh well, we're going to talk about this person and really it's their problem, and like whatever, like I can't believe they did this, and then it becomes this terrible thing. And I keep thinking, I don't think that's like I don't think that conversation is not only is it not glorifying God, it's not speaking very well of like my character. And Lord, I hate admitting that. Um I think sometimes we go in with this idea that we need good counsel and good wisdom, and somehow Satan and our own selves stirs that into a place, instead of it being a really fruitful opportunity to look at our own decisions and correct those, or maybe help someone through a difficult time. And instead it turns into this thing where it's not fruitful, it's damaging to someone's soul as well as our own. And I think just taking a hard long look at that and saying like, how charitable am I being, and how merciful am I being, and how judgmental am I being? And none of that is fruitful for our souls. Yay, I'm so glad I admitted that on your
Yeah, you did it.
podcast, Taylor.
You did it. I like
Yeah.
how you spoke for all women, even though I said I'm going to be wearing a dress this Sunday. Like, I feel like I'm tailoring a dress. I should have some say for women, but fine. I guess you can have it. But I think those are good questions we're through Sunday of Holy Week, right? But for the rest of the week, for the rest of the last couple of days of Lent, if you're listening to this in the few days it comes out, or if you're listening to it throughout the Triduum, those are the kind of the questions that I'm focusing on this week, and some suggestions that I have for you. Like, where is God in your life where you may not notice him? Like, he might be there. Like, there might be a burning bush waiting right next to you and you haven't noticed it. Where are the places where you're not recognizing that God's already there and he's there? Where are the places in your life where you're not allowing yourself to see God there? That's kind of my question for this week. I hope that you guys have a fantastic Holy Week. I had this image, and I'm not sure if you're going to like it, Kathryn, but it's how we're going to end. So you can hang up whenever this is done.
So
anyway.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So you've got a month to recover from it. But I was thinking about going full. We brought up Father Rob way too many times unintentionally that we have to end the show with him. And the image that I have in my head is that for years this episode has been our Holy Week episode, WEAK, because I always feel like I'm kind of limping into Holy Week after Lent, right? So I imagined this, like, we're not going to do it, but I think it would be very funny to put a picture of you flexing on one side. It says Holy WEAK, and then his arm with his tattoo on the other side, Holy Strong. So that's my dumb idea to end this show.
Well,
Good old
are you
Father
saying
Rob.
I'm really glad that I like Father Rob. There's some things that I would do for him that I would not do for you, Taylor. But maybe I'll do that for you. I'm thinking I'm not going to do it right now, but do you want me to do a still photo later? Oh my gosh.
Of you flexing. It'd be so
No,
funny.
that way I can
include him.
Photoshop it.
Yeah. I was about to say this. Look, you can take the picture. You can send it to me if you want, but it's your pre-summer workout with your son picture. You have to have a pre and post picture for that.
Fair.
So you go ahead and take the pre-picture. But I think it would be very funny. Now I'm kind of into this idea. We put it up and we use his arm without telling him, and then just tag him anywhere, and he'll be like, "What the heck are y'all doing?"
It's like, what is going on? I'm trying to celebrate Holy Week here.
Father Rob, we talked about you for an entire hour, and you weren't in the notes at all. We just both brought you up multiple times. So.
Isn't that crazy? Well, he's a great priest with a lot of, I think, challenging. I think he challenges us to be better Christians. There are lots of great priests out there, and he happens to be one that came to mind. I love that both of us mentioned his name. It wasn't. I did. I looked over my notes. I was like, nope, not in my notes either.
Yeah. It was just kind of became a running thing. So, final reminder, pray for your priests this week. They are so incredibly busy this week. So, pray for Kathryn's bodybuilding experience this summer. Pray for your own Holy Week. Pray for our priests this week. That's Kathryn Whitaker. I'm Taylor Schroll. She'll be back next month. I'll be back in a week. See ya! Thank you all for watching and listening today. I hope that you enjoyed it. We had a great time recording. We are praying for you here in this Holy Week. We hope that that you'll really be able to engage in the Triduum Holy Thursday, Good Friday, the Saturday, and Easter Sunday. What is it called? Good Sunday? What is it, Saturday? I don't know. Quiet Saturday. Lack of presence of Jesus Saturday, I think is what Kathryn was calling it. Either way, we are praying for you this week. Please pray for us, and we'll see you very soon. Love you.